What is the most hilarious historical fact you know? Notorious pirate hunter Benjamin Hornigold once attacked a ship just to steal all of the crew members' hats. His men had gotten drunk and lost their hats during a party the night before and decided to board a ship to get replacements. The founding fathers won't let Benjamin Franklin work on the Declaration of Independence because they were afraid he would slip a joke into it. Ben Franklin is my favorite founder. Dude just seems like that cookie uncle everyone has in their family that's just a blast to be around. The Pentagon wasn't built that way for any defense reason. In fact, it's not even a regular pentagon. It was designed to fit nicely into the empty field between 5 major roads, but then later there was some reason why they had to build it somewhere else. I think it was too close to some city or something. Anyway, they'd already paid someone to design this 5-sided building, so they just said frick it, it's a pentagon now. In the northeast of England, there are names for people from various places. Geordie, for people from Newcastle, and Mackham for people from Sunderland, maybe the most famous. Similar with Cockney for parts of London. The place I was born in, the NE, also has a name for its people, monkey hangers or hinger, in dialect. Apparently, during the Napoleonic Wars a French ship was wrecked just off the coast of Hartlepool, and a little monkey that had been dressed in a little monkey French uniform for onboard lols washed up on shore. Hartlepool, being a little coastal town, wasn't super full of intelligent people, and some of the locals decided to try the monkey on the beach. They asked it all sorts of questions, but because it was a monkey it A, didn't have a freaking clue what was going on, and B, obviously couldn't speak, let alone speak English, as the Hartlepoolians had never seen a French person or a monkey before. The obvious conclusion was that this monkey in his little uniform was a French spy, and they hanged it. Solid work, guys. The beautiful addendum to this story is that Hartlepool has taken so much pride over the years in being the monkey hangers, most notably making the mascot of their football soccer team a monkey called Hangus. Even better, the man dressed as Hangus, Stuart Drummond, ran for mayor of Hartlepool in 2002 in the monkey costume, promising free bananas to school children as his major policy. The best part? He won the election and served as mayor for 11 years. To make things even stranger, he was Hartlepool's first elected mayor, and the post was abolished after he stepped down, meaning that the only elected mayor in the history of Hartlepool was a guy in a monkey costume. In 1847, Robert Liston performed an amputation in 25 seconds, operating so quickly that he accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers as well. Both patient and assistant later died of sepsis, and a spectator reportedly died of shock, resulting in the only known surgical procedure with a 300% mortality rate. In 1942, 2 Gestapos caught a Polish resistance member, Józef Mierzyński. Instead of turning him in, they decided to milk the situation and have him lead them to the resistance's weapons stash, so the 2 Gestapos could claim a greater catch and possibly get a promotion. He led them to a secluded house in Sziers with their attic storage accessible only via folded ladder. The attic turned out to be full of stolen war-matched guns. In fact, there were so many crates of guns and ammo there that the Gestapos grew tired of taking turns hauling it out and forced Joe on gunpoint to get up there and drag the boxes out himself. As could be expected, he promptly gunned them down through the ceiling. But hey, there's more. The noise attracted the attention of the Nazi-controlled police and German troops, and Mierzyński had to escape. So he did the most logical thing. Instead of running away, stealing a car, or something, he slowly packed as much guns as he could into a biggest bag, walked nonchalantly to the intersection, and hopped on a tram, the slowest possible means of escape, sat there and started reading a newspaper until he reached Lord's. During the 1916 Easter Rising in Ireland, the start of Ireland declaring independence, fighting between the Irish and English stopped in one park so someone could come feed the ducks Swans Street, Stephen's Green, in Dublin, and it was the Swans. In fact, they had an agreed upon ceasefire every day during the Battle of Street Stephen's Green so the groundskeeper could feed the swans. Didn't stop them from destroying his house, though. Daniel Stiebelt, a top pianist in his own right, challenged his contemporary Beethoven to a musical improv duel. Stiebelt did believe he had a shot. He was no kid and had already composed for Marie Antoinette and operatized a successful version of Romeo and Juliet. He showed up to the improv and played one of his own works, for which Head brought the sheet music. Once it was his turn, Beethoven turned the sheet music upside down and beautifully fricked the piece sideways and backwards, overturing Stiebelt's style all the while like a cat teasing a particularly boring mouse. No one ever challenged Beethoven to a musical improv again, least of all Stiebelt, who never again set foot in Vienna. Julius Caesar was once kidnapped by pirates, and when he found out how much they were ransoming him for, he was offended at how low the amount was, and told them to raise it. Meanwhile he spent his captivity annoying the shoot out of his captors, holding poetry readings, and generally being a pompous dick. Oh, and he also joked that He'd eventually hunt them all down and crucify them. The ransom was paid, Caesar was released, then he hunted them down and crucified them. Personal favorite: studied ancient history at university. Why yes, I do never use that in my career. The Battle of Drepanatps, / Wikipedia. org/wiki/battle of Drepana. Romans attempting to take out the Carthaginian naval forces that broke a siege. Weird Roman naval fact: they kept sacred chickens to determine when the gods favored them. You throw the chickens some grain, and if they eat, you should attack. Important to note, the chickens are only fed when you need to decide whether to attack. Normally chickens forage between battles, but these ones are on boats most of the time. Romans are super pragmatic about fighting. They're completely aware that semi-starving the chickens will mean they should always eat. When you want to attack anyway, the commander at Drepana decides to attack, so they bring out the chickens and toss them some grain. The chickens ignore the grain, they don't even touch it. This is not a good omen. His sailors start to get freaked out, but has determined to attack, so he tosses the chickens overboard and says let them drink if they don't want to eat. Does not go down well with his forces, but Romans are disciplined, so they do as commanded. Romans get thoroughly trashed by the Carthaginians. TL. Doctor, if starving chickens don't eat your grain, don't fight naval battles against Carthage. A lesson we can all apply today, for sure. Edit. Mobile typing while eating Subway, not a recipe for accuracy. During the First Crusade, in the Siege of Jerusalem, the Christians were using a battering ram to crack through a wall. When the Muslims started dropping firebombs on it, the Christians started putting the fire out, but it was already badly damaged. Realizing that the fire had made it impossible to move, the Christians decided to burn it completely to clear a path forward. So they started lighting it on fire. When the Muslims saw this, they started pouring water down on it to put the fire out and save the battering ram. Maybe not hilarious, but where else am I going to get the chance to share this mildly amusing story? In 1890 and 1891, a man named Eugene C. Philintps, / Wikipedia. org/wiki/Eugene released a total of 100 starlings in New York City. The two flocks 60 and 90, 40 and 91 are estimated to have 200 million descendants in the US and are considered an invasive species. Why did Eugene do that? Because starlings were mentioned in the works of Shakespeare. Maybe also because he had done the same 30 years earlier with sparrows, and he hoped the starlings would nudge them out. Why did Eugene release sparrows? Why? Because they were mentioned in the works of Shakespeare. I love the quest for Jesus' foreskin. See, Christianity is unusual among the world's religions in that there is no earthly remnant of its most important figure left. Dude done went up to heaven. You see, but back in the Middle Ages some clever bastard realized that, since Jesus was Jewish, he would have been circumcised, and therefore Jesus' foreskin was still out there in the world somewhere. Thus began a years-long quest to find Jesus' foreskin, which ended with several brave knights returning to the Vatican with numerous specimens, all of which were closely examined until one was declared authentic. One can only imagine how that investigation went. Jesus' foreskin became an object of worship after that, although, unfortunately, it has long since been lost, meaning that another quest to find the foreskin that everyone thought was Jesus' foreskin needs to be undertaken by someone. You're welcome, Naughty Dog, for giving you the plot for the next Uncharted game. Edit. My stupid spelling. In 1866, Lichtenstein sent out an army of 80 men to participate in the Austro-Prussian War. They came back with 81 men. suffering no casualties, and having made one friend along the way. One day Alexander the Great asked the philosopher Diogenes why he was sifting through the garbage. Diogenes responded, "I'm looking for the bones of your father, but I cannot distinguish them from the bones of his slaves." Also, Alexander the Great asked Diogenes if there was something he could do for him. Diogenes replied, "Yes, get out of my son. Plato wants to find humans as featherless bipeds." Diogenes brought a Pythagoras chicken into Plato's classroom, saying, "Behold, I've brought you a man." Fidel Castro really likes to drink and eat dairy products, so he made a gained ice cream shop and it's still functional. He mixed two breed of cows to create a super cow that would stand up to heat and give out lots of milk, and her name is Uba Blanca. From the memoirs of Bill Bellamy, a British WW2 tank troop commander, one of our favorite pursuits was to eavesdrop on other squadron wireless nets while we were resting. This could be very exciting and, on occasion, very amusing. One splendid moment occurred when C Squadron were out on a standing patrol and Michael Payne, a young and popular troop leader, was in a hedgerow with shelling taking place to his front. Apparently the whole area was covered with cattle, who paid little attention to the lethal objects dropping around them and concentrated on the job in hand. Suddenly over the air came the laconic voice of Mickey, "Gunner, you see that poor cow in front, which has just been wounded? Put the poor devil out of its misery, will you?" He obviously imagined he was talking on his intercom and not broadcasting to the world, because he then remained on the air with his microphone switch pressed. There was a moment of silence, and then a rat-tat-tat of the Bisa machine gun. Then came Mickey's agonized cry, "Not that one, you bloody fool, the one on the left." We didn't let him forget that for a long time. George Washington would bow when greeting others because he didn't like physical contact. Would be much funnier today. Pythagoras, the man who made one of the most iconic mathematic discoveries in history, had a phobia of beans. Not necessarily hilarious but interesting. The men in George Washington era wore those white wigs because syphilis was running rampant, and it caused patchy baldness. Wigs were expensive though, and it soon became a status symbol and a sign of wealth to wear one. The wigs were also fashioned in the way the military men of the time wore their hair, akin to today's crew cut, so it was also seen as a cool style. George Washington's actually wasn't a wig, it was his own hair, which was reddish, rolled and turned under, and covered with white powder. After Napoleon Bonaparte's death, his priest confessor Vignali allegedly cut off Napoleon's penis. This was later sold as part of a collection, and ended up in the possession of Drive Abraham Rossenbach. Rossenbach took Napoleon's penis on tour. It was displayed on a small velvet cushion in New York's Museum of French Art. Apparently it's now owned by the Latimer family in New York. The giant tortoises taken from the Galapagos Islands never reached their destination because the crew ate them. President Lyndon Johnson liked showing journalists his penis, whether they wanted to or not, and also talking about how big it was. Emperor Constans II of Byzantium, having thoroughly infuriated the populace of Constantinople over his mishandling of various matters concerning the church, and fearing for his life, moved his court to Syracuse in Sicily in 663, and proceeded to spend the next few years fighting the Lombards in Italy and stripping former Roman provinces of wealth to fund his court. In 668, after rumors that he'd have the capital of the empire set permanently to Syracuse, one of his attendants murdered him in a fit of nostalgia while Constans was taking a bath. The weapon of choice, a soap dish. Valerius Maximus wrote about Aeschylus' death. Basically, the dramatist Aeschylus heard of a prophecy that he would meet his demise by a falling object. Because of this he went outside of the city in order to avoid his death. Little did he know that an eagle with a turtle flew over and dropped the turtle on his shiny bald head, mistaking his head for a rock. There was a Japanese soldier named Hiro Onoda who never realized WW2 was over until 1974. He was sent to a small island in the Philippines to spy on the American forces. He evaded capture and remained in the jungle to carry out his mission for the next 30 years. His former superior had to come out of retirement to convince him the war was over. 1,000 people died When the Austrian army attacked itself over a few barrels of schnapps, the army of Austria, approximately 100,000 strong, was setting up camp around the town of Karansedes, now Karansib, in modern Romania. The army's vanguard, a contingent of hussars, crossed the Timi River nearby to scout for the presence of the Ottoman Turks. There was no sign of the Ottoman army, but the hussars did run into a group of tsigani, who offered to sell schnapps to the war-weary soldiers. The cavalrymen bought the schnapps and started to drink. Soon afterwards, some infantry crossed the river. When they saw the party going on, the infantry demanded alcohol for themselves. The hussars refused to give them any of the schnapps, and while still drunk, they set up makeshift fortifications around the barrels. A heated argument ensued, and one soldier fired a shot. Immediately, the hussars and infantry engaged in combat with one another. During the conflict, some infantry began shouting Tursi, Tursi, Turks, Turks. The hussars fled the scene, thinking that the Ottoman army's attack was imminent. Most of the infantry also ran away. The army comprised Italians from Lombardy, Serbs, Croats, and Austrians, plus other minorities, many of whom could not understand each other. While it is not clear which one of these groups did so, they gave the false warning without telling the others, who promptly fled. The situation was made worse when officers, in an attempt to restore order, shouted halt, halt, which was misheard by soldiers with no knowledge of German as Allah, Allah. At the 1901 World's Fair in Buffalo, President McKinley was shot, and before he died, a team was organized to get Drive Roswell Park, a famous area surgeon, to downtown Buffalo from nearby Niagara Falls to operate on the dying president. The team got to Niagara Falls, where Drive Park was in the middle of a critical surgery. They said something along the lines of Drive Park, your services are needed immediately in Buffalo, to which Drive Park replied, I cannot leave in the middle of performing this surgery. Even if President McKinley was dying, I can only imagine the someone from the Get Drive Park to Buffalo team saying, hey buddy, you should actually take a seat. We need to talk about exactly that.